Hello, welcome to Sterlo's Wrap.
Oh, straight rhythm!
Bang, take advantage of it.
Oh, stand and applaud!
It's a stupid question.
It's not!
I have far greater expectations of you than that.
Oh, yes! He's gone all the way!
Now, he's popular, he's a great leader, he's the mentality of this football team.
Oh, and another one from Cleary!
Well, it doesn't get much better, does it?
Absolutely outstanding, and the finish is just as good!
It's rugby league, isn't it?
Hello, welcome to Sterlo's Wrap of round 19 of the competition. Some very competitive games mixed in amongst some very big scorelines. A man who tried to make the Olympic skateboarding but just missed out. Peter Sterling, good to have you back.
And thank you, Matt. I'm waiting for the rugby league to be on the menu at the Olympics.
2032?
Make a comeback. There you go. That'd be nice to get some sleep at some stage in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, it's good stuff.
Very interesting, wasn't it, this weekend, where we had the rare occasion where the top 8 sides played the bottom 8 sides, and you thought if ever there was going to be a weekend where you would get blowouts across the board, that might have been the weekend, but it didn't work out that way. Obviously, a couple of huge score lines. We had 60 scored in one game there, but some tight affairs, which was kind of a breath of fresh air. I'm also just wondering, with some clubs and maybe some players, that sort of post-origin period, I won't call it a hangover, but there's kind of a little bit of generally a little bit of a lull there in some shape or form. Maybe a part of that as well, but in earnest now, the run into finals football, and it's going to be a battle royale for that 7 and 8.
I know one team that you're talking about in particular about the post-origin. I'm going to talk to you about that a bit later. Forget 60 points. He has 82 points for the first game that we're going to look at. Rabbitohs 60, Warriors 22.
Yeah, and
tackling's overrated anyway.
Well, this is a game that clearly got away from the Warriors and they contributed to their own demise. But what I like about this South Sydney side is that they can do it in a lot of different ways. They've got a lot of potent points of attack. But if I'm Wayne Bennett, I'm delighted when I see Latrell Mitchell want to get involved in the game straight away. That's the first play the ball that South Sydney have. He didn't look for a winger to pass the ball to. Then middle of the game, this is just, well, this is ludicrous. That's an amazing ball to Cameron Murray to score. And his last touch, after we have a replay, that's Arthur Beetson.
That's
at his
amazing.
Best. He brings what Curran in the headgear there, who had no idea it was going around the back of him. And that's Latrell's last touch.
Yeah.
So his first is getting into dummy half, not looking for anybody else to carry the football from his own end. Some extraordinary plays during the course of the contest, and then to finish like that. When Latrell shows that intent close to the line, he is unstoppable. There are a couple of decent defenders in front of him there who had decent position as well, and you saw the motivation behind Latrell, and there was ever only going to be one result, and that's him bursting through. So, as I say, if I'm Wayne Bennett and I see Latrell involved early in the game, I sit back in my seat and feel a little bit more comfortable about things. They were clearly aided by some Warriors errors. Against the top sides, you've got to get everything right. You've got to get into the arm wrestle. You can't give up cheap ball. And unfortunately for Reece Walsh early on, an acre to kick into, puts it over the sideline.
Peter, he kicked out on the full again from a kickoff.
Well, we're about to see that as well. But that kick there, that led to one of the Tom Burgess tries. And then from the restart...
How do they do this?
Well, I don't know. Like, clearly...
The Warriors have, I reckon, have at least done this seven or 8 times this year.
Well, again, unfortunately, on the back of that, straight away,
points.
Jackson Paulo scores. Yeah. What you're trying to do from the kickoff is to get the ball high and down into the corner so that what they call hang time, you get the chase down there and the first contact with the men bringing it back is 10 metres out from the opponent's try line. So the higher you can kick it and the deeper you kick it, the better field position you get. But you can't push the envelope to that much. Certainly you can't kick it over the sideline, which we saw again on the weekend in one occasion. But to go long, you're getting it wrong. You've got to err on the side of caution. And from both of those kicks, points were scored from South Sydney, and then the roll just started. And once the momentum was against the Warriors, they just couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Poor old Warriors, they've been knocked around by injury again. They've got 3 hurt out of the game on the weekend too. Fanua Blake, I think Murchie got injured. There was another as well that slips my mind, but they've had no luck.
And just talking about that hangover from Origin, I think there's a bit of a hangover from the Warriors from what they've had to endure for the last season and a half. You know, we've praised them as to how they've contributed to keeping this competition alive, and they've done a fantastic job. But I just think that the signs of wear and tear are there. They didn't make their run during the Origin period, which we kind of tend to associate with the Warriors, because they don't have representation normally. And unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a pretty insipid finish to their season as well, which won't see finals football.
Chemist Warehouse Sunday footy here on 9. Sharks 44, Bulldogs 24, the full-time score. The Sharks up into 7th place on the ladder. But the big issue out of that game, the hamstring injury suffered by Shaun Johnson, who has been in remarkable form over the last month, if not a little bit longer. That could be a real thorn in their side.
As we sit here, we're not quite sure of the severity of the injury, but hamstrings are difficult ones. I wouldn't expect him to play certainly next week, and maybe for the next couple of weeks.
He didn't seem very optimistic when we spoke with him during the coverage yesterday.
Well, that's what I'm basing a lot of it on as well, from the reaction straight away. You can tell when a player is distressed with the degree of the severity of an injury. They know straight away that this isn't something that's going to be a minor thing for him. This young man, Raiden Trindle, thought he looked really efficient and really confident in this performance. So with Shaun Johnson probably not there, this young man, I would imagine, will be alongside Matt Moylan, who I think makes his return next week in a timely one. But I like what I saw from Trindle. There was a kind of a composure about him, and that I think he's played enough first grade now to maybe step up here in the absence of Johnson and play with some nice control. So that's a plus for them. A big win for the Sharks. And again, the Bulldogs, like the Warriors, their own worst enemies in regards to... They get back into the contest, score a try, silly offload from Dylan Napa straight away. From that, Luke Thompson comes up with an ordinary effort in taking out Braden Brayley, and he's on the sidelines, and the game got away from the Bulldogs there. But so it's an important win for the Sharks, and again, it improved their for and against enough to take them from 9 up to 7th, and that will be key in these coming weeks. Is to, if you're going to lose low. If you're going to win, try and win it by as much as you can. But to go from 9th to 7th was a nice confidence builder for the Sharks.
The round kicked off with a good win by the Raiders over the Eels. Thought Canberra's defence under enormous pressure was outstanding there in the first half. A lot of ball for Parramatta. 12-10, the full-time score. Parra came back late, almost snatched it, but couldn't, Pete. If you wanted to see a sign that the Raiders have turned it around, it was that tenacity in defence, I reckon.
Absolutely. Yeah, their best performance by a country mile this year, based on defence. And Parramatta did come back at them. I was critical over the weekend. I didn't think Parramatta played enough football, and I'll just got a couple of things I picked out in a moment. But from the Raiders, the fact that they were able to maintain that aggressive nature and the ferocity in defence for the duration. And I really thought that the final try from Jordan, try-saving tackle from Jordan Rapana on Micah Sivo, that kind of exemplified the kind of performance we saw from the Raiders. Like, he put his body on the line. Sivo, when he got the football 10 metres out, like, he just scores.
He scores.
But the will and determination of the cover defence coming across, it spoke volumes about this Canberra performance. I was critical of Parramatta not playing enough footy, and these are unusual ones, but these are the ones that kind of catch my eye. This is second half where Parramatta are looking to score points. Now, Junior Paulo, we've pointed out many times, is your point of difference. He turns there, 10 out, and can't find anybody. Now, here again he goes. Now, if he's going to offload, it shouldn't be back to a hooker standing still. That's where the halves have got to be pushing up, Clint Gutherson pushing up. You want to take an offload at speed to take advantage of what Junior Paulo offers. Now here, inside ball from Dylan Brown. There's an offload. Now we stop it there. Now Dylan Brown, if you have a look over to the left, there's space. But his first instinct there is to just drop the ball back on the inside to Junior Paulo, which does... It does nothing. It's a waste. You work so hard to get down that end. You get an offload. You get it with enough time to have 10, 15 metres to the defence, and then you can see that maybe there's some space to take advantage of out there. But your first instinct is to drop the ball back inside to a big forward who's just going to run in. Now, there was a couple of passes thrown after that, but by the time that second offload had come about, Canberra got another defender there. They got their defence straight and aligned, ready to defend. Whereas when the first offload came, they just looked to be, to me, watching it, and I know it's easy from the cheap seats at home, just seemed to me that there was a bit of space for Dylan Brown to explore, to just see if there was something that could unfold. Offloads are like gold in today's game. You don't want to just turn the ball back on the inside to another big forward on the back of one. And on the two that we showed at the start of those clips, when there's an offload, the best offloads are when somebody hits the ball at speed to really take advantage of it, not catching it and then trying to start from flat feet to get something going.
It's been a bugbear of yours about Parramatta's play most of the year.
Well, I'm not going to talk about it again because I don't want to hit you over the head with it. It's been ad nauseum. I think that if Parramatta are to be a chance in this competition, and they are in serious jeopardy now of not finishing the top four. This is a huge game, the Roosters game on the weekend, because it's well documented. Parramatta have a very, very tough run home, and to lose to the Raiders, a team not in the top 8 at that time, that's a real blow to them. But I do think that, the effort is there. I just don't see the way that they play for the majority of games can worry the big sides. It can't just be about completion rates. You've got to have more to your game than that.
Okay. Storm 20, Cowboys 16. Good competitive game. This one too in Friday night footy. Ryan Pappenhausen back essentially for his first game since round 6. He played a handful of minutes in round 10 when he copped that concussion. Thought he was a bit tentative, and you can understand that. He's been through a terrible time with the concussion.
I think you got it spot on. That's the word I would use. He looked tentative, and we spoke about him last week, and we did predict that he would come back on the bench, and Nico Hines would obviously just retain that fullback jersey for a period of time. And I think that'll, after what we saw on the weekend, it might be a little bit longer than kind of expected, because there was a real hesitancy about his play. We spoke to him on the Sunday Footy Show, and he went out, he spoke about the trials and tribulations of this time on the sideline as to how it knocked him around both physically and mentally. And it's going to take him a number of weeks, I think, to get back to where he needs to be for a finals campaign. He looked slight to me as well, as though he's lost some condition, which again is completely understandable. But with Hines playing such great football, I think we see this as the compilation of the Melbourne side for a few weeks yet. I think that Ryan Pappenhausen will come off the bench until we see that he's embraced the game fully once again. And Nico Hines, well, he's just playing great football. He's done his very best to retain that fullback position. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that's going to be the case for a number of more weeks than I was expecting. I thought Pappenhausen would be back in fairly quickly, but it might be much closer to finals time before we see that changing from 1 to 14 and 14 to 1.
The big game coming up this week as well, and we're here to review the round, not necessarily look ahead, but it's a bit hard not to when you've got Storm v Panthers coming up on Saturday night. I had a look at the market from our good mates at Sportsbet before we came in here, Peter. $1.28 Melbourne. Now, I know Penrith are going to be without a whole stack of players.
Well, they're going to be without key players as well. I think we're believing that Nathan Cleary won't be there. I don't see Isaiah Yeo playing, so straight away
suspended.
When you take when you take those three out, you can understand why there's so much support. And how many of the Storm won in a row now? They've won 15. So although they come off a pretty poor performance, I don't know. I didn't sit down and count them, but did I read somewhere 60 odd missed tackles for the Melbourne Storm in that game?
Well, that was certainly flat.
Yeah. So, and they'll be a lot better. I tend to think that. Looking at the Penrith performance and the Brisbane and the Melbourne performance on the weekend, I think they both had a bit of an eye for what was to come instead of the job at hand. And
the Panthers beat them earlier in the year.
Yeah.
If the market's right, Melbourne are going to beat Penrith this week. If your respective coaches, you're eyeballing each other all season, what are you looking at in terms of this game? I mean, is it an important game in terms of the potential matchup later in the year, or is it not?
I don't think win-loss is extraordinarily important. It's more about performance. I think now you're looking at building momentum to go into that final month. So I think it's more about getting your game right, getting your players confident. So, a win would be nice, obviously, to build that up. But what I see on this weekend, I don't think is going to carry a whole lot of importance for me for what I expect to see further down the track. But you want to see good signs now, and you want to see the basis of the game that you're going to take into finals footy.
Origin hangovers. The Panthers have never had this level of representation in Origin. Are they suffering from an Origin hangover?
Well, Jerome Luai was a little bit off, although he'd been on the sideline for 3 weeks with the injury. But yeah, look, I do. I've always thought that probably month after finals footy, Origin is so demanding, not just physically but mentally. And that's something when you haven't been a part of it often. I think it's something that you do carry after an Origin campaign. For New South Wales players, getting beaten in game 3-2 is a little bit different than wrapping up a series with a clean sweep. But I don't expect it to be too much of a problem now. But yeah, I kind of expected that there would be a little bit of a lull in some shape or form for players and for clubs that did have that representation. Well,
the Panthers kicked out to 18-0 after a tryless opening half against the Broncos. It got pretty close in the end.
Yeah, and they and that was the surprise, is that 18-0. I think we all sort of sat back and thought, okay, well, it took a long time, and they had a glut of possession in that first 40 minutes. It took a long time for them to get that 18-0 lead. But if the game goes another 5 minutes, Brisbane, you got the sense that they were coming to get them.
Does Matt Burton have to go into the halves? Are you surprised he's stayed out in the centres and May's been playing in the halves? I mean, this is one of the great emerging halves of the game. I know he's done a great job in the centres. He's one of Penrith's leading try scorers, but they seem to lack direction and there's a bit of clunkiness about them. Does Penrith a better team with Burton in the halves with Cleary out?
He's an interesting one, isn't he, Tyrone May? Because he was, if you remember, I'm sure that he was used in the grand final in the centre position.
Started at centre.
With Brent Naden going onto the bench. So he's obviously... they see a lot of value in him because he's in their 17. And it will be interesting when Pangai Jr. does join the club is to see how that 17 changes and who is possibly going to miss out. It's not going to be Tyrone May because of what he offers with his versatility. But, look, it's a good question. I think with Luai back, he was probably expected to really control things. And the fact he'd been out a couple of weeks, I don't think Jerome was at his best. But I think when finals football comes around, you'll see Burton playing in the centres. And so I think they're quite happy to leave him there now.
That answer's as clear as mud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Lastly on this, Flegler was a send-off, wasn't it? 3 weeks,
yeah,
3 weeks suspension, and Yo's gone for the game. We'll just have a look at it here. How's that not a send-off compared to what we've seen for the rest of the year?
Well, Ivan Cleary made the point that magic round, he's off, and you can't dispute that. Yeah, look, I think so. And again, you look at the reaction of Isaiah Yeo, he's in trouble straight away. It's a clean hit, and
that's the tackle that we need to get rid of out of the game.
Yeah,
it's not the slaps around the head and the accidental stuff. It's the forearm to the jaw.
I think that was the general consensus that it was a send off, and I don't think anybody would have been disappointed with that decision.
Roosters 28, Knights 8. Disappointing second half from Newcastle. The Roosters far too good.
They were, and again, under duress, they lose both Billy Smith and Matt Ikavalu, and so they end up with Tupanua in one centre and Angus Crichton in the other centre. And I think what really disappointed me, because Newcastle started this game well, they got away to a good lead, then made some pretty ordinary errors, and the Roosters hit back. And going into the second half, the one thing that Newcastle knew is that they were running into a very strong wind. So you've got to have a plan. Now, part of that plan is how to take on a side that are different to the way that they took the field in regards that they've had to make those changes. So you've got to take advantage of the fact that they've got back rowers playing in the centres. I didn't see much evidence of that. But the first thing that you have to address is your kicking game. Now, kicking into the wind, the first thing you have to do is kick flat, stand flat and kick low. Now, these are the kicks from Newcastle, which is exactly opposite. That's standing deep and kicking high. Once the first one of those goes up and is ineffective, then you've got to stay.
Peter Sterling 6-iron, that one.
Well, that's more my driver. I don't get that much distance with my 6-iron, but it just didn't cut the mustard because it's not the tactic. It's running into the wind, you're trying to get as much distance as you can, so you've got to stand up flat, and you get coverage now because in that last tackle you can actually stand a player almost in between the marker and the kicker to get in the way. So you buy yourself a bit of time there. I think it's ridiculous that you can stand offside and do that, but it does allow a kicker to stand up instead of deep and drive the ball. Brett Camorley was very, very good at kicking the ball through the line or flat over the line. But Jay Clifford just persisted with that, and the first one he puts up early in the second half, it nearly comes back over his head. That's not going to be a good result. The opposition get the footy, and you've picked up nothing. So I just thought the lack of a plan from Newcastle for that second 40 minutes was particularly disappointing. All
right, other games: Manly 44, Tigers 24, another point-a-thon, and the Gold Coast Titans 32 over the Dragons 10. St George Illawarra was shocking yesterday, and the Dragons players have breached the bubble, and I know it's a difficult position that everyone finds themselves in, generally, but particularly with rugby league players who they're now in camp up in Queensland. But that could well cost the Dragons a finals place.
I think it will, Matt. I do. They won't win a game. I don't believe during the period where they've have to leave players out of the side. No Corey Norman in this one. No Zach Lomax. Cody Ramsey comes into the centres. It was a very different looking Dragon side, and they need to start winning games. You know, they're close enough if good enough, but I think that situation of having players out for those couple of games is going to hurt them. Or a side like the Raiders are making a run now, 3 straight wins. And possibly more to come. The Dragons are going the other way, unfortunately.
Well, I've got here on my piece of paper, who are you awarding the last 2 spots in the finals to? You're saying Cronulla and Canberra?
Yes.
Yep.
I think so, yeah. I just want to... I thought some really nice coaching in this game from Justin Holbrook as well, trying to get a bit of a rocket up David Fifita. So he left him on the bench, but I love the fact that when he put him on the game after, I think, 20-odd minutes, 23 minutes, he put him to the right-hand side of the field. Now, Cody Ramsey was the makeshift left centre. He terrorised him all afternoon.
Imagine how Cody felt when he saw David Fifita galloping over to his side of the ground.
And this is something, again, we've spoken about probably a couple of seasons ago. Our game has got to get to the stage where you have the ability as a coach with your back rowers, your centres and your wingers to swap them around, to move them to different sides of the field, not just to be known as a right centre or a left centre or a right winger. If you can see in the opposition that a better matchup to give you an advantage is the way to go, and David Fifita going up on the right-hand side against Cody Ramsey, it worked a treat. He had a wow of a game, and was a major concern for that left side defence for the St George Illawarra side, and I think that was nice coaching, astute coaching. It got the best out of David Fifita on a couple of different fronts, and it made it harder for the Dragons in this game. So I hope we see more of that kind of coaching where you look at the opposition, and again we've said it before that it's a bit of a shock to the system where somebody looks up and sees a different face to what they were expecting.
Especially a very large one like that.
Because you do your video work and you put your time in as to your opponent and what's going to be in front of you, and if that looks different when they go out, it can be a bit of a setback and an advantage to the coach who's brave enough to maybe swap things around a little bit and not just go with one bloke to play in that channel every week, because it can be advantageous to do it a different way. All right, that's round 19 wrapped up. Round 20 coming up here on Nine's Wide World of Sports. Thursday footy, Roosters Paris. Sterlo's already told you about that. Broncos Cowboys, one of the great rivalries Friday. And Sunday afternoon's game, Cronulla versus Manly. Yeah, it's a great round coming up, and we're going to have... in this, 6 weeks now until we get into the finals footy, there are going to be a lot of these kind of games. But the battle in earnest for the top 4 now. Parramatta's lost last weekend. It brings the Roosters and Manly right back into contention there. 4-point gap opened up by South Sydney. I think they've taken a major step to securing that top 4 finish. But now I think the chasers for that 7th and 8th position they're not as many as what I thought they were going to be in the final couple of weeks. You know, I think a few teams have dropped off and aren't capable of picking up the 4 points needed to get back onto the tail of the 8.
Thank you, Pete. Good weekend.
Good to see you, Matt. Thank you.
See you next week for Sterlo's Wrap.